Okay, so we have been trying to get towards a very important equation in fluid mechanics called the Navier-Stokes equation. We have not reached there yet, but we were discussing some equations which were going to be extremely instrumental in getting us there. So one of the first things we had discussed was the conservation of linear momentum equation for a differential control volume, and we had reached this particular end right here. And here the trouble in solving this equation comes primarily due to this particular term, which is an unknown at the moment. So unless you know this particular term, you are in no position to go ahead and compute this any further. So while this equation is the proper momentum equation, it represents the conservation of momentum for any given fluid, you are in no position to go ahead and solve it. So in order to solve it, we started asking ourselves, how do you evaluate this sigma ji, and we looked at the type of fluid is the type of fluid called the Newtonian fluid, and once we went through various modeling aspects related to that, we finally arrived at this very important relationship which relates sigma ij to the rest. Now remember that sigma ij is a symmetric stress tensor. So sigma ij and sigma ji are represented by the same quantity here. And so now we are going to look into get to the Navier-Stokes today, but before we do that, we want to make one important simplification. Okay, so the simplification is, so I'll just a second, I'll just go back and I'll take this equation right here. Okay, so let's say this equation Okay. So we'll simplify this equation a little bit more, and in order to do that, look at these two terms here. Okay, the first two terms. Okay, can we simplify this any further? Okay, so let's say we have del t of ui rho plus del xj of rho ui uj. Okay. So now what I am going to do is I am going to apply chain rule, and I am going to split this up. So the first term I can split this up into rho del t of ui plus ui del t of rho. Okay. Similarly for the second term, what I will do is I will club rho and uj together and I will bring ui out. So let's say the first term will be del xj of rho uj plus rho uj del xj of ui. Okay. So these two terms here, they have ui common, so I can sort of combine them. Okay. So I can combine these two to write this set of equations as ui del t of rho plus del xj rho uj. And then the second set of terms we'll talk about, we'll just take the rho common, and you can write this as uj del uj by del xj. Okay. So now let's ask ourselves, what is this first term? This first term, if you recollect, this is actually the continuity equation. Okay. This is and this term is nothing but the rho of dui by dt, okay, the total derivative. Okay, I think I just made a small mistake here, just a second. Let me please correct that. This should be ui. Okay. Yeah. And the first term is rho ui, uj, right. Okay. So this looks right. And so this equation that we started out with, if you apply the continuity equation, then you can simplify this equation into rho dui by dt equal to, so I will just take these two on the other side, okay, rho f, just a second, b comma I plus del sigma ji by del xj, and this now becomes my new momentum equation. This is also momentum equation. Both these two formats are valid. This format is often called the non-conservative format of the linear momentum equation, whereas this is called the conservative format. We are not going to go into details of why that is so. We will not need it for this course, but if you want, you can read up more about it. Now you notice this one more thing I want to let you know. This side is basically the mass. Okay, in dynamics we have F equal to ma, and here what you have is, on this side you have ma, and this is your total force. So this is like ma equal to F. So we have sort of swapped F, the locations of F and ma, and this is the traditional way it has always been written. So so in that sense it's just the swapped version of it. Anyway, so this is basically, if it helps you remember, this is F equal to ma, with this side being the F side, the force side, and this side accounting for the mass into acceleration. Okay. So now that we have this equation, can we use this and replace our terms? So we know that sigma ji is the same as minus p plus lambda del uk by del xk del ij, which is the Kronecker delta, plus mu times, which is the dynamic viscosity, del ui del xj. This is a symmetric matrix, so it doesn't matter which one you write first, right? So let's insert this known function of sigma ji over here and then see what we get. So replace sigma ji in momentum equation. And if you do that, then what you will get is rho. On this side we will have whatever we had, plus you will have the rho force, body force, right? And then you will have, okay, so the first term. Now I hope you remember what happens when you have this del xj operator and then you have the Kronecker delta. So you will end up with minus del p, and here it is del x, but this, because of the Kronecker delta, this will become del xi, and then plus del xi of lambda times del uk by del xk. Okay, so same thing happens to the other term, and here you will remain with del xj, and you will have mu times this, obviously this rather complicated term, xj plus del ui, sorry, uj xi. Okay. And this is now the complete equation for a Newtonian fluid, and this is where we wanted to have head, and this is also called the Navier-Stokes equations for a Newtonian fluid. Okay. So now I hope you are at a stage to understand and appreciate that the Navier-Stokes equations are, the way it is written, it utilizes the conservation of a linear momentum equation, and along with it the continuity equation is also utilized at one place to simplify things, and you end up with this particular formulation where then you utilize the constitutive relationship that is special for Newtonian fluids. So the Navier-Stokes equations are, in a sense, the statement of, it's not a plain conservation formula, but rather or a conservation statement of conservation of something, but it combines the statements of conservation of linear momentum, mass conservation, and the continuity the constitutive relationship, not the continuity. Yeah. So the three are put together to arrive at the Navier-Stokes equations. So these equations are only valid for a certain class of fluids and not for all different type of fluids that you might encounter. But again, as I said, Newtonian fluids on Earth, we tend to encounter, I mean, the largest bodies of fluids that we see, air and water, they are Newtonian, so it works out very well for us. And that is why these equations are held in such high regard, because their relevance to understanding our planet and flight, modeling of flight, understanding swimming in water, etc., it's extremely high. Great. Now this equation we can still simplify further if we had to assume a incompressible Newtonian fluid with, let's say, constant dynamic viscosity. Okay, so we can go ahead one more step and we can simplify. So this can be simplified further. For incompressible, incompressible Newtonian fluid with constant dynamic viscosity, and here what you would want to do is to get here, you will need to, so let's say the pressure terms are usually written first, this is just a matter of convention, and the body force terms are written last. Okay, as I said, just a matter of convention. So then you can take this mu out, okay, if the dynamic viscosity is constant, and then you can expand this to say this is going to be del square ui del xj plus del xi of del uj del xj. I have just swapped, I have opened this here and then I have swapped this x del xj del xi. And I think the reason why I've swap, this will be quickly apparent to you. This is the body first term, and as I said, it's usually written last. Now the reason I swapped this is because this, I think you will recognize immediately, and if it's an incompressible fluid, what's going to happen to this? This term is going to go to 0. So I can just get rid of this term, right? So this allows me to simplify it into rho dOI dt minus del P del xi plus mu times del square ui del xj del xj plus rho f. Okay. And this is again an important form of the Navier-Stokes equation that you will commonly encounter. Now, water is often treated as an incompressible fluid for many simple applications, not for ocean by the way, but in oceans water can be stratified and the density can be quickly changing. But in general, for small shallow pools of water, they usually can be regarded as incompressible, specifically when the velocity of the particle inside it is small in the sense of compared to the speed of sound in that medium. So even air, if your velocities are not high enough as compared to the speed of sound, sometimes you don't have to take the compressibility effects too much into account there. Anyway, this solution of the Navier-Stokes is going to be more discussed in the second part of the course, which is going to be with Professor Ratnesh Shukla. So I'm not going to go into details. My job is to get you acquainted with this equation and make sure you understand it properly, so that when you work with his solutions, you will be able to see why he's doing whatever the solutions he's pursuing. Now I'll just also write this particular equation in the vector form, and this is what it will look like. Yeah, obviously all the operations that I did in tensor notation, you are free to try it with the vector notation as well. Now so as I said, most of the problems are usually incompressible, and rho and u are often constant, and these equations can be decoupled from temperature equations also. So one can solve, so unless the temperature differences are very high, one can sometimes neglect the energy equation and just solve for the Navier-Stokes. For the energy equation, I am going to just give it to you separately in a write-up, because I am not sure we will have time. Today I want to start off into vorticity, and because that also is a very, very important chapter. So we have looked at how these equations come about, and for us this particular equation was very, very important, the Navier-Stokes equation. Now here, if you set the viscosity equal to 0, okay, this term also drops out. Okay. So this is right now a second order equation in U, which means that you will need how many boundary conditions? It is second order equation. Then you should think about how many conditions you require to solve this. Again, that part will come when Professor Shukla works on this, but right now it suffices to tell that this is a second order equation in U, right, and now and first order in P. So if I set my mu equal to 0, this term can drop out. Okay, this is a very important simplification which is sometimes done for special fluids. So for the idealized condition of inviscid flow, which means that the viscosity is equal to 0. The equation simplifies to the NS equations. NS stands for Navier-Stokes. Equations simplify to and obviously the other condition is incompressibility and incompressible. Okay, so I'm just going to write it in brackets. Okay, so then we simplify it to rho del ui del t minus del p del xi plus rho f, or in vector form the same thing will become okay. So these are very important equations in fluid mechanics also, because there are situations where one can actually neglect the viscosity term and consider a very idealized situation where the viscosity is 0, and this particular equation now, which is the Euler's equation. Okay, let me write it down as important thing. This is Euler's equation. Okay, and it is first order in U and in P, and it is simpler than the second order equations of the Navier-Stokes. And this, but the fact that it becomes a first order equation, it creates some problems at a fixed wall. For example, if you have, so there is a very famous boundary condition that people use at a fixed wall, and that is called the no slip condition. And that no slip condition has to be dropped. Okay, and tangential velocity has to be allowed to slip. Okay, so let me just discuss this no slip condition right here. No slip boundary condition. So the no slip condition, I'll just take a very simple case where you have, let's say, a parallel plate, and the top plate is moving with a velocity, let's say u, or okay, let's me not have too many u's, let's say this is v. Then you have to impose boundary conditions at these two boundaries, and the no slip condition states that for the tangential velocity at a wall, okay, the tangential component, by the way, the tangential component of the velocity at a wall under this no slip condition implies that the velocity of the fluid here has to be exactly the same as the velocity of the wall. Basically, in a sense, it's implying that the fluid is not slipping with the wall. Whatever tangential velocity the wall has, so does the fluid. Okay, so if this is your u, okay, and this is, let's say, this is z, and this is at z equal to h. Let's say this is h, and this is z. So u at z equal to h is equal to v at this point, and at this other point, if you have one dimensional flow and you are representing, so the u is the velocity in the tangential direction, then here at z equal to 0, and let's say this is not moving. Okay, so this is fixed, this wall is fixed. So then what will be the velocity here under the no slip condition? My tangential velocity has to equal the velocity of the wall, and my wall is not moving, so this velocity is 0. So these are the boundary conditions one has to set for this kind of a to solve the Navier-Stokes equations. One has to give appropriate initial conditions and appropriate boundary conditions, and the no slip boundary condition is a very, very important boundary condition for the tangential velocity. Okay, so you just want to maybe make a note of this, that this is for the tangential velocity. And in case of Euler's equations, so why does this no slip boundary condition is a realistic one? The reason is viscosity. Because of the viscous nature of molecules, we assume that the contact is good enough such that whatever is the velocity of this, the molecule here has to adopt at the very location, at this very location, will have to adopt whatever velocity is with the wall. Okay. So if the flow is so often, for example, people draw flow over a flat plate. So let's say you have a flat plate like this. I'm sure these things you have seen in your undergraduate class, but we will just quickly do that. And then we have flow coming at u infinity, and then you have a velocity profile that develops at the wall, and here at this non-moving wall your velocity has to be 0, and then after some time it goes back to the velocity of from 0 it reaches a velocity of u infinity. Okay. So this is due to the no slip condition, and the viscosity of the fluid ensures that the fluid molecules close to the wall have the same condition or the same velocity as this wall. Now when you apply the Euler's equation, the equation becomes simpler, first order in u and p, and a consequence of that is you have to let go of this no slip condition and in fact let the flow slip over that. Okay. Another consequence of the Euler's equation for steady incompressible frictionless flow, when it is integrated along a streamline along 2 points. Okay. So another consequence, so let's take a streamline. So this is, and I'm going to show you this in a little bit more detail in the next class, but I'm just going to write down the equation. So let's say this is a streamline, and take Euler's equations for steady incompressible and frictionless flow. Obviously frictionless flow goes without saying because it's the Euler's equation. One can show that between points 1 and 2 of a streamline, this p plus half rho u, the magnitude of u square, plus rho g z1 is is approximately equal to p plus half rho u square plus rho g z2 when evaluated at point 2. Okay, and this equation, and z is basically this way. So this is z and gravity is down, and this equation is often called the Bernoulli's equation. We'll come to that when we start looking at sorry, I'm just irrotational flows. Sorry, yeah, I mean somehow the word was just escaping me. Yeah. Okay. So now we want to start off on a new topic today, and that topic is called vorticity dynamics. And here we will start looking at how vorticity is important and what are the important consequences of understanding fluid flow through vortex dynamics. So we are going to look at vorticity dynamics rather. Vortexes are related to it. You can look at your book. The way I will go about it is slightly different than the book, but will stay very close to what the book discusses also. And we had discussed vorticity some time back, where we had defined vorticity as a vector which was twice of the angular rotation vector, and this quantity we had also said is equal to this vector operation, which is the cross product of these two, or in tensor notation you can write it as the ith component is the same as ijk epsilon ijk del uk del xj. Okay. And here the important thing is a flow is called irrotational. A flow is called irrotational if omega, which is again the same as this cross product, is equal to 0 vector, and this is 0 everywhere. So if the vorticity, okay, so this omega is vorticity. So if the vorticity is 0 everywhere, your flow is irrotational, which is is basically the analogous idea in just simple in the velocity context is of stationary fluid. So a stationary fluid is a fluid where u is equal to 0 everywhere. Just like that, a irrotational flow is one where this omega cross, so the omega vector is 0 everywhere. Okay. And the second important thing is analogous to streamlines, one has vortex lines. Okay. And the vortex line, just like the streamline, you define it exactly analogously to the streamline, and then the equation which the defining equation for a vortex line becomes this. One can work this out yourself, but the idea is the same and the derivation is exactly the same as a streamline, because we are trying to develop the idea of vorticity analogously to the idea of the velocity. Okay. The other, now the way we have defined vorticity, okay, so if you take the divergence of vorticity, okay, this is equal to 0. Sorry, just a mistake. I made a mistake. This is u. So this is a vector identity. I believe I had asked you to prove this when we were discussing these vectors in chapter 2, right? I think you should be able to see very easily why that is the case, and basically this implies that the divergence of vorticity is equal to 0, and this implies that in a flow there can be no sources or sinks of flow, because this is an identity. Okay, so the fact that this is equal to 0 does not come from any fundamental law, but rather it is a mathematical identity, which means that it has to be always be true. So the way you have defined this vorticity ensures that vorticity is always 0 in a flow. So this implies that there can be no sources or sinks of vorticity in a flow. And this is a very, very important observation actually. Okay, and that begs the question that if that is the case, then can you ever have vorticity generated in a flow? The answer is no, but it can be introduced at a boundary. Okay, so but it can be introduced at a boundary. Okay, so this is going to be a very, very important observation. This is it's a very simple mathematical identity, but it gives a very, very important insight into how vorticity is generated in a flow and how it is transported also later. But at the moment, we can understand that because of this identity, there are no sources of sinks in the flow, so additional vorticity cannot be generated at any given point, but it can be introduced at a given boundary, okay, or a boundary of the flow. Okay, so we'll just stop this lecture right now, and then we'll carry on with the vorticity part again in the next part.